Hello, my name is Andrew McConachie from ICANN staff, and with me today is Cristian Hesselman from ICANN Security, Stability, and Advisory Committee to talk about a recent report the SSAC has published on DNS and the Internet of Things. Thank you for joining us today, Cristian.
You bet.
Can you tell us a little bit about the SSAC's report on DNS and the Internet of Things?
Sure. The title of the report is called The DNS and the Internet of Things, Opportunities, Risks, and Challenges. The number is SEC 105, and we released it early June. And the report talks about the IoT and the DNS as two co-evolving and interacting ecosystems. And the purpose of the document is to enable the ICANN community to understand the IoT ecosystem and the interaction with the DNS. And it's kind of a different type of report than what we usually put out from the SSAC, because it doesn't contain any recommendations. It's basically a tutorial-style document to help the ICANN community understand, well, the interaction between the IoT and the domain name system.
What are some of the opportunities that the DNS offers for the Internet of Things?
There's various opportunities, and we list a few in the report. But basically, they stem from the DNS being a globally distributed infrastructure that can provide various security functions on the one hand, and that the IoT introduces new types of more stringent security, stability, and transparency requirements. So, for example, if you look at a typical IoT deployment, it consists of IoT devices that interact with people's physical world, so they sense information, but they also act upon it. And they have connections to edge networks, for instance, through Zigbee or Wi-Fi or 5G or whatever, then connect to the internet, and then connect to back-end services that they use to perform their tasks. So it's basically a constellation, it's like a group of IoT devices, network connectivity, and services that these IoT devices make use of. And the opportunity for the DNS is, for instance, that it provides, it has a DNSSEC for message integrity verification. So with DNSSEC, so assume that all these IoT devices support DNSSEC validation, so they can validate DNSSEC signatures. Then this means that they can validate that they're talking to the right service on the internet to perform their task. For instance, they know that if they share information about people's physical environment with that back-end service for analysis, for instance, they know that they're sharing it with the right service. Right. So this reduces the opportunity, the probability that a cyber criminal, for example, is able to replace the genuine service with a malicious service, and as a result, the IoT device sharing sensor data with a malicious service, or accepting instructions from a malicious service.
And what are some of the risks that the Internet of Things poses to the DNS and the wider Internet?
Yeah, so one of the risks that we identified in the report are IoT botnets that can launch DDoS attacks on DNS infrastructure. And this, let's say, analysis is based on various measurement studies that have been carried out by academic institutions in the past. And basically, IoT botnets are IoT devices like cameras and light bulbs and whatever that have been infected by malware. So they contain a vulnerability, for example, and that allowed cyber criminals, for instance, to install malware on the device, and they then control it. And this means that the botnet master, in this case, can send out a command to these infected devices to all start sending traffic to a target at the same time. So this would then constitute a DDoS attack on that target. And that target could be a DNS operator, but could also be other types of DNS infrastructure or service providers like banks or critical infrastructure like energy grids, for example.
So given some of the risks and opportunities that we've identified, what are some of the challenges to the internet community that they can address these with?
So one challenge, for example, is to develop a DNS security library for IoT devices, so that IoT devices would be able to validate DNS signatures. So that's the opportunity we spoke about before. And the other challenge would be to mitigate DDoS attacks from IoT botnets, which we think requires a whole range of measures. So it would require IoT developers, for example, to have a better understanding of network security and device security. So that's more like an educational component, I would say. There's a need for security systems in edge networks so that they can detect and clip off DDoS attacks or DDoS traffic from IoT devices early on, so proactively, I would say. And there's a need for infrastructure operators to, for instance, share information on IoT botnets. So, for instance, they could share information on what type of DDoS traffic a certain botnet would generate, how they handled it, and then share that information with other infrastructure operators, like a DNS operator, so that they are prepared in case the attack traffic comes their way.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Cristian. Thanks for talking with us today.
You bet.